Hello, I'm April, and welcome to the 5-minute grant making sessions. Writing techniques for grants. In traditional research, our audience is typically the scientific community in the field. In grant writing, it's more the reviewers with limited expertise. The terminology in traditional research is usually field specific with a lot of jargon. In grant writing, it has to be universal, easy to understand. The focus must be to defend the research and the review of the literature in traditional research, while in grant writing, it's about selling a feasible and impactful project. The style of the writing itself in traditional research, it's more explanatory, elaborate, lengthy, while in grant writing, it's a lot more persuasive and a lot more objective and succinct. The stance that we take in traditional research is academic, while in grant writing, it's a lot more about being a service provider to the scientific community, but to society in general. The content of the document in traditional research involves literature and theory and the rationale and our analytical approaches, while in grant writing, it's a lot more about stating the specific goals, activities, and the needs of the project and how we're going to cover those needs and how we're going to achieve success. The message that we want to send in traditional research is a lot more theoretically and empirically grounded, while in grant writing we need that grounding, but it's a lot more about showing to reviewers that we are experienced and passionate and we have a realistic vision for our project that we're looking for funding to make happen. The organization of the document itself in traditional research is relatively loose. Even though we have those sections, we distribute them according to different purposes, while in grant writing it's usually a lot more clear with the use of many headers, many of those that are given from the sponsors themselves and comes to us through the solicitations, which is what the structure is about. Again, relatively flexible in traditional research, a lot more rigid and based on very clear sponsor rules in the grant writing world. The formatting itself in traditional research goes through an association like APA, for example, but in grant writing, it is again connected to the sponsor and what the sponsor expects and might be a lot more rigid in that sense. And finally, the work process in traditional research, it can be individual, while in grant writing, it just has to be collaborative. Even if you're collaborating with an administrative faculty that will help you submit the proposal, that is already some form of collaboration. Another very important point about grant writing is the idea of theory of change. Showing reviewers how your project is changing something or has the potential to change something is very important, and in many cases is explicitly asked for in the solicitations. So you can ask these questions: what changes can your project promote? What do you expect will change? How does your project promote that change? What specific steps are you taking to ensure that change? Like getting a good team, distributing your efforts wisely. How can that change impact society, etc., etc.? You get the point. To illustrate that, I brought some infographics that I found by Googling theory of change, which I recommend that you do if you're developing a theory of change. There's a lot of material out there. And here you can see how they developed ideas around their early, intermediate, and long-term outcomes. In this graph, they start at the bottom with their activities and they build the expected outcomes up to the impact goals to match the impact goals at the top. In this one, they start with the population, the activities, then they go through some standards and some sort of grounding that they have built, and they get to the ultimate social outcome at the end. Here, they also go through critical questions that they have about their project, and they show how the project attends to those to the end where they get why this is so important and into the final outcomes that they are presenting. In this case, again, very simple, takes you from the inputs to the outputs to the changes down to the long-term changes. And then finally, a more comic book type one, again, through the participants' activities, what are expected changes, and how that would build stronger and more connected communities in the end. So this idea of theory of change is a very important idea in the sponsor research world. And as much as it is developed in the traditional research world in the form of frameworks and theories, here this term, the terminology theory of change, is very common, and I would highly suggest that you can become familiar with this idea of theory of change and add that to your research, sponsor research design, and to your grant proposal design. So this is it for this video, and I'll see you in the next video.